Thank you for staying with us. As we said before, we're speaking to the Children's Authority, and we're speaking about children being prevented from being abused and how that's everyone's business. We want to protect our children. Welcoming via Zoom is Ahhalia Ramdass, and she's a psychologist with the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome, Ahhalia.
Hi, good morning, and thank you so much for having us on the program.
Thank you for being here. So we want to talk about, protecting our children, and we're talking about, prevention of abuse of children. Let's talk more about it and in terms of what the authority, views it as and what we're doing about it.
Okay, so the authority is the specialized agency that is charged with the care and protection of children. And so we receive reports from or various stakeholders from the general public when children are being abused or maltreated. We send officers out into the field to substantiate these reports. As long as a report is substantiated, then we take action. If the child needs to be removed, then we do so. If interventions need to occur, we follow up with same, and we put children and families onto the various resources that they may need following these events. So that is what we do. At the Children's Authority, like you said, we that child protection is everyone's business because we receive on average anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000 cases per year.
Okay.
That's thousands of children who have been abused in some way, whether it's sexual, physical, emotional abuse, who have been neglected or ill-treated in some manner. And so we are really hoping that we can change that narrative in Trinidad and Tobago. We are hoping that through more public education sessions, through programs and initiatives like this, we can continue to talk about abuse so that parents and children can know how to identify signs of abuse, and they know where to go, the numbers to call to access the kind of help that they may need in that moment. So, we feel very passionately about it, about the protection of our children, ensuring that our children are living with the rights that they're entitled to, safe homes and environments, access to, their physical needs, to education, to health care, living life free of violence,
Yes.
being able to play and enjoy their life, being able to express themselves and share their opinions. So we are concerned with the children in this country, and, we want to hopefully help the general public get there, get to that place where everyone is saying child protection is everyone's business, getting back to that place of the village and the community, being mindful of our children.
Yes, definitely. And you said some really powerful things there, in terms of the authority and what they're doing. Going back a bit to the pandemic. So we would have been in a pandemic where children, had to stay home for a long period of time. And in terms of in families or in spaces where children are exposed to abuse, how did the authority deal with that in that case where children were bound to home? And there was no escape necessarily to school or to lessons or anything like that. Did you see an increase in cases? How was that for the authority?
So the authority worked right through the pandemic, and we continued receiving reports. Now, the tricky thing about during the period of the pandemic is that, like you said, children were cut off. They're cut off from their usual routes of communication. So a lot of the times, if children are facing abuse within their home, they may report to a school teacher, they report to the guidance officer, the social worker, someone in the school compound. Being at home now, there's less of the opportunity to do that. Many children across Trinidad and Tobago were without devices. To be able to access, call someone, and, being just isolated. So we continued to receive reports throughout the course of the pandemic. Unfortunately, a lot of the streams of communication were cut off, but still we received reports, of persons noticing things within their homes, of teachers noticing things within their online classes and spaces and these things. So it was a difficult time for children, not only being left to the mercy of potential perpetrators, if that was their reality, but just being cut off from access to so many things that, they have through their school system, through their other activities.
Yeah.
Yes, that they would usually engage in.
Definitely. And we know we are now out of the pandemic. We still have, COVID is still around. There are people who are still affected from it. And we're still dealing with the effects of that pandemic. Students have since returned to school, exams are flowing, classes are flowing as regular. Talk to us about their mental health though, because that's still a period in time, that may have been traumatic for some, even if they weren't in households that, faced abuse. Just the idea of being cut off and being, stuck at home, not being able to go to school, interact with friends, what their mindset may be like right now and what sort of help they may need.
Okay. So often you find that adults tend to feel, believe, think that children don't feel things the
Yes.
same way we do, and they don't experience things the same way we do. But I would like to say that I think children had it a bit worse than the adults in that they were literally trapped at home.
Yeah.
Adults, depending on the job that you had, still had to leave the home to go to work, or still had to leave the home to go to the groceries and these places, while children were just isolated, stuck at home, without their usual forms of entertainment, without their lines of communication, without access to their friends and their sports and their music classes and karate classes and all of these things. So you would find that anxiety,
Yeah.
that depression, all of those things that typically occurs that we as adults felt throughout the pandemic, they felt it also with less avenues to manage that, or with avenues to expel some of that anxiety or those feelings that were associated. We had children who were living potentially in terror of losing family members
Yes.
and loved ones. Children who, like I said, didn't have access to devices, may not have had access to food and all of these things. So that worry of what's happening next is not only the parents worrying about where is it coming from, but the children who are at home also worrying, where is it coming from?
Yeah.
How are we going to get food? Because maybe they were accustomed to having food through the school systems. Maybe their parents lost their jobs during the pandemic, or the work was reduced so that now it was a strain. So many things, all of the things that impacted us as adults impacted the children as well. And they had less of an opportunity to get out. They had
Yes.
less of an opportunity to connect and to communicate. And so coming out of that, we've had a loss of social skills. So, we tend to ignore that development, the normal development of children was impacted during
Yes.
that period of time when they were cut off from their peers and their social supports. And throughout adolescence, late childhood adolescence, that social connection becomes so much more important for developing their various skills and, developing the personalities and who they are. And so, all of that would have taken a really big hit
Yeah.
during the pandemic. And now that they're back out to school, some children may not have learned to readjust to the system because we have the younger ones who would never have been in school or had such little contact with school. They don't know how to interact and engage in a school setting.
Yes.
Or they may be, the stimulation may be a bit too much for them. They're not accustomed to it. Or older children, they had all that pent up anxiety, all that pent up stress. And so, they never had an outlet. Now they're in school and they're reacting to everything. And so we have to be more aware that they did go through this pandemic just as everyone else.
Yes.
That we have to check in and ask the questions because maybe they don't know how to express what they were feeling, what they are currently feeling. And, we have to extend a little bit of grace with our children as they learn to readjust. We just came out of last year when we had exams and we're going back into exams. We had
Yes.
children who struggled because they didn't have the same support and access that they had previously when approaching examinations, and so having to fight up and do it on their own, that comes with its own set of challenges and emotional distress. So I think it's important that we remember that they went through a difficult time as well, that they may not have the words or the experience to express exactly how they're feeling, how they felt impacted.
Yes.
And it's our job to listen, to pay attention, to be present, and to provide the support that they need as they readjust, or we get back to the normal. You said we're out of the pandemic. I want to cautiously say that because
Yes.
many are still
Still,
experiencing
yes.
challenges associated with COVID. COVID is still around. And so, some of those fears, some of those, distresses, they still do exist for many families.
Yes, definitely, definitely. In situations where parents or guardians or even teachers may see the need for intervention, whether it's that the child needs to speak to someone, some schools may not have guidance counselors. We know that, there are schools that do. But in cases where they need to reach out, is there a service that the authority offers where parents, guardians, or teachers can access this on behalf of children?
So the authorities' mandate is to address child protection needs, the
Right.
care and protection of children. So if children are being abused, maltreated in any way, they can reach out to the authority at 996 or 800-2014 to make the relevant reports. We encourage parents, teachers, caregivers, other persons in position of trust to reach out to the Student Support Services Division if they're noticing things in school that's occurring with the children. We encourage parents and guardians and teachers to reach out to Childline, that
Yes.
they have free services also available for children who may need that counseling, that person to speak to. And we try as much as we can to engage with the public. So if a school or an organization requires the authority to come in and to speak on particular topics, we are always happy to do so and going and do these sensitizations on topics and issues like child abuse and neglect and maltreatment. When talking about preventing child abuse, we want to tell the public and let the public know that it's so important to explicitly teach children and even our adults what abuse is. Teach them how to identify the various types of abuse, how to identify signs of abuse, and what to do if you believe that a child or that if you believe that you are being abused, who you can reach out to. So as much as we can, we try to share that information. We try to be accessible to public by way of sensitizations as well.
Definitely. I want to find out, just switch gears a bit. We would have seen a video circulating and reports of a child being seen driving. In instances like that, the child is now put in harm's way. How does the authority deal with that? What's the view on that? And how do you intervene in a situation like that? Is that something for Children's Authority to deal with?
So in that instance, the child is being placed in harm's way. That would be considered cruelty to children, where you're putting them in a position where physical harm can occur, where that child is concerned. And so, yes, we would step in if a report is made that this child, we've seen it, the report is made that this child is being placed in harm's way. And so then our mechanisms will kick into place, and, we'd have our officers from the investigation and intervention unit investigating the reports really, and making a decision as to what comes next, what are the next steps in that instance.
Okay. And just before we wrap, in terms of missing children, now I know the police unit deals with that specifically, but in terms of the Children's Authority, we have, children who we see missing, but repeatedly. Is that a cause of concern in terms of something happening in the home, and does Children's Authority intervene in those cases?
So it can be a sign of something happening within the home. To say what is the exact reason, we can't pinpoint exactly one reason that children go missing with frequency, but it is, a very big red flag that something may be happening in the home, something is happening with this child that is causing them to abscond. Or that they may be taken away from the home, by someone being threatened and harmed in these sorts of ways. So it is a concern for the authority. You would see that when when children go missing, and the police would put out the missing persons notices, the Children Authority also responds by putting out these notices and asking public to communicate or contact the authority or the police if these children are seen, because
Yes.
this is one of the ways that our children are being mistreated and ill-treated. So we are very concerned about it. We do work very closely with the Child Protection Unit to ensure that all children, and that's anyone under the age of 18, is kept safe, has access to the help and the resources that they need. Many times some of these children are victims of abuse, and so when they are found, the authority then steps in to follow the protocols and the procedures that we have in place to get these children out of the harmful environments and the help that they may need, because our public has this idea and perception that the Children's Authority just takes children, but our goal is to ensure that children are kept safe, and so we are very focused on rehabilitation as well. We are very focused on maintaining family units. So,
Right.
it's providing the support that families may need to address whatever concerns that they have that may be causing disruptions to their family home, that may be causing distress to their children. And so we try our very best to support and build capacity, build parenting capacity, and the capacity of that family unit to provide the appropriate care
Yes.
that their children would need, and to work with the children and families as much as possible to address whatever trauma or distress that may have occurred as a result of abuse or maltreatment.
Okay. And lastly, we have seen reports, at least 2 reports I noticed, where children were witnessed crime. So they witnessed whether it was robbery or, the killing of a loved one. How does the authority deal with this? Because they've now experienced something really traumatic, and they have to be able to live through this and move on from this.
So children who have witnessed violence or witnessed murders, the murders of their parents or persons, within their family units, they experience that distress very much like an adult would experience.
Right.
Distress having been exposed to this violence. So they may become fearful, they may see changes in their behaviors because it's a distressing and trauma-inducing experience. You may see changes in their appetite, withdrawal, anxiety, you may see the sadness, you may see that they have classic signs of PTSD, which is, reliving the experience, becoming fearful of certain individuals or spaces, all of these things, so many signs and symptoms. And we would want to be, or encourage adults to be supportive and present. So the adults in their lives, whoever it may be, it's important that you explicitly let your children know, let the children know that you are there for them, that you are there to listen, explicitly discuss what safety measures are put in place for their own safety. You're letting them know that you're here for them. You're letting them talk through the experience as much as needed to, to just get it out a little bit. You're paying attention for when these signs and symptoms then become so distressing that it affects the child's ability to continue functioning.
Yes.
And then, at that point, you reach out and you get help. So as much as we can, again, it's about public information. It's about letting parents, caregivers, adults know what you can do in circumstances like this. It's about encouraging parents and caregivers and persons in positions of trust to continue building relationship with children, getting to know your children so that you're able to identify when the behaviors change, what is not normal for them, to establish and cultivate open lines of communication with our children so they feel safe coming to you to express their distress or express their needs, because not every child has that safe space and that judgment-free space to do so. These children are likely cared for by the victim support unit of the TTPS.
Right.
Unless there is an element of abuse that the authority needs to step in and address. They are cared for by other arms of the child protection mechanism. And so, our job as the authority is to give that support where it is needed, is to provide providing public with information and with education, or online or social media platforms, our communications unit, they work so hard in putting out information, putting
Yes.
out parenting tips, having live sessions on Facebook, doing sensitizations where we bring this information to the fore, and we try our very best to help, or we're trying our very best to help change that mindset that we have, that children should be seen and not heard, or that children's needs aren't as important or aren't real. We're really trying to challenge those negative beliefs and attitudes that continuously put children at risk, because
Yes.
even if you're not actively harming a child, by holding on to those types of attitudes where you don't see a child's experience as real or as valid, or you don't allow them the space to come to you and say, this is happening to me, or having children believed, then you are it's perpetuating the problem that we have, and it's continuing. It's providing more challenges than helping when it comes to eradicating something like child abuse, or addressing these concerns that our children face
Yes.
continually.
Yes, understood. Where can you be found on social media? Because as you said, the social media team is quite active with posting tips for parents and so on. So where can persons find you on Instagram, on
So
Facebook?
we, so we are on Instagram and Facebook. You can visit our website at www.ttchildren.org. So our website has all of the information. We're very active on Facebook. I believe our Facebook Lives run on a Wednesday evening, and we have various sessions, various topics of interest
Yes.
to provide information with stakeholders from other agencies. So it's not just persons in the authority, because it's so important for us to have that collaborative effort
Yes.
when dealing with child protection. And so, we work along with our partners as much as possible. So, yeah, you can, come to Facebook and just type in Children's Authority, Instagram, go to our website, and you have the relevant links there as well.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ahhalia Ramdass, psychologist at Children's Authority. Thank you for joining us this morning and for sharing with us all that the authority is doing.
Thank you so much for
No
having us.
problem. We take a short break. When we come back, we have lots more in store for you. Stay with us.